everybody. This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. I am so happy tonight to introduce everyone. We have DP Lyle for you tonight. He is going to be talking about Rigged, which is a Jake Longley thriller. It is book number 4 in the series. So he is going to talk to you about the book and also be answering questions. So if you have any questions, make sure that you put them in the comment section down below, and I'll be passing those along to him. And also, we have signed book plates available for the books. So you'll see the link above the video. If you go there, you can purchase personalizing for you as well. So, yep, we're in for a real treat tonight. I am going to go ahead and log off and let DP take it away. Have a good event, guys.
Thanks, Constance. I appreciate it. I hope everybody's having fun tonight. I hope you're not going crazy with all this sequestration stuff, but we will move on and have some fun tonight. As Constance pointed out, this is my Jake Longley series. I have some old series, but I have 2 current series running. One is the Kane Harper series, which is a darker and more traditional thriller series. And then there's the Jake Longley series, which is more comedic, slapstick, funny, happenstance, serendipity, that kind of stuff. And it's mainly driven by Jake. Jake is an ex-professional baseball player, was a pitcher for the Texas Rangers. He threw out his arm in a cold night in Cleveland and ended up taking his money and buying a bar down in Gulf Shores, Alabama on the beach. And Jake's ambitions in life are to basically run his little bar restaurant and lay on the beach and chase bikinis, as he says. His father, Ray, is a PI of some substance who runs an investigative company, and Ray has some murky ex-military that has to do with black ops and all that stuff. Nobody really knows what Ray did, but Ray's a very serious guy, and he can't understand why Jake won't work for him. But Jake says, why would I want to do that? You know, that's like a job. And so each book, Jake gets drawn into basically Ray's world by happenstance, by whatever, by hook or crook. And the 3 books before were Deep Six, A-List, and Sunshine State. And so this is the 4th one, Rigged, and it actually comes out tomorrow. It's set in a small town, in a real town in South Alabama on the Mobile Bay called Fairhope, Alabama. And if you've never been there, if you ever get down to Mobile area, the Gulf Coast, Gulf Shore, you must go to Fairhope. It is truly, truly, truly a wonderful town. It's called the Carmel of the South. It's very artsy. It's got a wonderful bookstore that actually appears in the book called the Page and Palette. And I've given talks there and signed there before. But the city sits on the eastern edge of Mobile Bay, so it looks across the water. So there's wonderful sunsets, great restaurants and bars, and like I said, artsy things. It's a high dollar neighborhood compared to the surrounding area, and but it's just a cool town. So if you ever get there, and this story is set there, and Jake gets involved in a circumstance. The story takes place because Pancake, who you will meet, is his best friend. They grew up together, and he's a big old oafish redheaded guy who is brilliant, works computers, and you do not want to get in Pancake's way. He will road grade you into the ground. He's a big bad guy, but lovable. And his 6th grade sweetheart is undergoing a divorce up in Fairhope. They live down in Gulf Shores, you know, which is an hour away, and they come up there to do some financial stuff for the divorce and all that. But then things go crazy, as they always do in fiction. The first scene basically introduces Jake and a circumstance he's in. So why don't I read a little bit of that, and then we will open it up and talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. But this is Rigged, and this is chapter 1. And I think you'll see the comedy in it and the kind of light touch that I use on this, as opposed to the Kane Harper series that is, like I said, darker and more traditional thrillerish. Okay, chapter 1. Life runs in odd circles. creates circumstances you never see coming, could never predict, makes for strange bedfellows. As my grandfather was quick to say, life can park your butt in some unpleasant locales. Loved that guy, more so than my father Ray, who could be a pain in the ass. Not that I didn't love him, just that he was a bit intense for my taste. I think he and I tolerated each other as much as anything else. I often wished he was more like his father, but that train hit the rails decades ago. Back to parking your butt in unpleasant places. Right now, mine had found itself on an uncomfortably hard wooden chair behind the defense table in the Gulf Shores Municipal Courthouse. I wasn't sure what caused the most unease, the seat, the fact that I was the defendant in the proceedings at hand, the stack of charges levied against me, or the sullenness of Judge Ruth Corvass. The woman was all decked out in her black robe, shoulders hunched forward, sharp eyes following my attorney as he walked back and forth before her, offering his closing argument. She looked like a hawk, eyeing prey, maybe a turkey vulture sizing up carrion. Made me reconsider having waived my rights to a jury trial. I was good with people, always had been. That's one reason Captain Rocky's, my bar restaurant, was so successful. I was the face of the operation. A jury might like me. Judge Corvas, less so. She looked like she had eaten a bad taco or too many barbecued beans. I could almost hear the rattle and clank of my cell door. All that aside, the most uncomfortable situation here today was my lawyer, Walter Horton. Yeah, that Walter. The one that had sliced and diced my finances during a nasty divorce proceeding. Picture being stripped naked, sprayed with icy water, and slowly bleeding to death. That doesn't quite cover it, but you get the idea. And then, after my legal colonoscopy, dear old Walter had married my ex, Tammy the Insane, as I so affectionately call her. Not that the moniker was erroneous, she truly was deranged. Apparently, Walter didn't see her that way, which made me question his judgment. But he was hands down the best attorney along the Gulf. And now I was in his hands. See, life can put your butt in some unpleasant locales. Your Honor, this entire case is a sham, Walter began. It has no basis in reality or in the law. The plaintiff, Mr. Edward Peck, has accused my client, Mr. Jake Longley, of kidnapping, auto theft, assault, and public humiliation and defamation. Walter turned slightly and pointed toward Eddie Peck, who looked considerably different than he had that night. Blue suit, red tie, clean shaven, hair combed to perfection, not sloppy, disheveled, hair matted with drunk sweat. All in all, he scrubbed up nicely. Mr. Peck should be thanking my client for saving his life, Walter turned back to the judge, and potentially the lives of others. Walter walked back to the table, squared up some papers, and gave me a wink. Walter winked at me, like we were old buddies or in some mutual conspiracy. The truth was that after the plaintiff's attorney, a slick SOB if there ever was one, finished his final argument, I felt like I was headed for Kilby's death row. I came off as an unrepentant master criminal who had unmercifully brutalized poor Eddie. I swear Judge Corvass looked at me like I was a serial killer. Looking for moral support, I glanced back at Tommy Jeffers, a.k.a. Pancake, my best friend and a witness in the proceedings. Seemed unperturbed, but Nicole, my girlfriend, also a witness to all that went down, had arranged her wonderful blue eyes in a wide stare that only added to my discomfort. Maybe she was working on an escape plan, a distraction of the guards while I bolted. She could do that without even trying. Or maybe a saw in a cake. Problem was that Nicole didn't cook. She possessed a multitude of skills, but none included an oven. The kitchen wasn't her best room. Walter continued, the facts that we have presented before the court tell the true story. Mr. Peck entered Mr. Longley's establishment, Captain Rocky's, just after 11 p.m. Several witnesses stated that he was extremely intoxicated and belligerent. Private investigator, Mr. Tommy Jeffers, testified that his inquiries revealed that Mr. Peck had just been expelled from another establishment, Jimmy's Wharf, for similar behavior. Your Honor has several affidavits from witnesses to support these facts. He then drove the half mile to Captain Rocky's in his severely inebriated state. Walter looked at his shoes, gave a slight shake of his head, waited, letting those facts sink in before resuming. He did so in a calmer, softer voice that required the judge to lean forward. He had her complete attention. He was good, very good. Mr. Peck ordered a double scotch. Miss Carla Martinez, the manager at Captain Rocky's, testified that when she saw Mr. Peck's state of inebriation, she refused to serve him. Mr. Peck took offense, became angry, shouted, called her a few unrepeatable names. As he reached for his car keys, which he had tossed on the bar before him, Miss Martinez secured the keys, saying he was in no condition to drive. My client, sensing the situation, approached. He offered to call Mr. Peck a cab, even offered to pay for it. For his good citizen concern, Mr. Longley was shoved and a punch was thrown. That's me, concerned citizen, knight in shining armor, white horse, Galahad, the whole enchilada. Unfortunately, Judge Corbus's hawkish eyes didn't soften. Could she really toss Dudley Do-Right in the slammer? Fortunately, Walter pressed forward, the punch missed my client. At this point, Mr. Tommy Jeffers interceded, grabbing the plaintiff in a bear hug. Once order had been restored, a cab was indeed called, and Mr. Peck left for home. Walter now looked back toward Peck. So, Your Honor, Mr. Longley did not kidnap Mr. Peck. He was free to go at any time, just not behind the wheel of his car. He did not steal Mr. Peck's automobile. He merely kept the keys until the plaintiff could return the next day, sober, and retrieve them. He did not assault Mr. Peck, and in fact was attacked himself. Only when Mr. Jeffers interceded was a truly physical altercation avoided. Walter adjusted his tie. He looked sharp, expensive, perfectly tailored three-piece gray suit, white shirt, red power tie. So Walter. He could afford fancy duds. Hell, I helped pay for them. So here we are, Mr. Peck asking for $50,000 from my client. A ridiculous proposition. He should be grateful Mr. Longley and his staff interceded and prevented him from potential harm to himself and others. Mr. Longley didn't call the police and have Mr. Peck arrested for assault or for DUI had he left in his vehicle. He took care of him, got him home safely. Mr. Peck should be grateful, not vengeful. Walter walked toward the bench and faced the judge. As for any public humiliation or character defamation, I think Mr. Peck took care of that himself. He needed no help from my client in that regard. Judge Corvus didn't take a recess or delay the proceedings for her consideration or anything along those lines. She made her judgment right then and there. Weren't quick judgments bad for the defendant? Like the evidence was so overwhelming that the result was obvious? Or was that only in jury trials? Judge Corvus didn't look happy. Did she ever? She stared at me. Uh-oh. But then turned her glare at Eddie Peck. I won. She tossed the case, admonished Eddie Peck regarding frivolous lawsuits, and even approved my restraining order. Walter's idea that prevented Peck from re-entering Captain Rocky's. Peck was furious, tried to protest, but Judge Corvus gavelled him into silence, adding that if he continued his protestations, he might find himself in contempt. Peck stormed from the courtroom. I shook Walter's hand and thanked him. My new buddy. Probably not. So that's the first chapter. And it goes on from there, and Pancake gets involved, and the story unfolds. But I hope you got a feeling from that of the voice of the story, the voice of this entire series, actually, that Jake is has a quirky take on life, is a bit of a smart ass, and doesn't really take things too seriously, even when he's facing losing a $50,000 lawsuit. So we got a few questions here. what was the original inspiration for this series and the character Jake? That's a great question because I don't know. Uh, Basically, I had this idea for a scene, and I kind of basically knew who Jake was going to be. I wanted to be an ex-athlete, but I want him to be one of these lovable, likable slackers. I didn't want him to have a profession, if you will. I wanted him to be one of these guys that didn't take life seriously, but and you knew guys like this that you just loved them to death, but they were so laid back and so calm and so relaxed that sometimes they were infuriating because it's like, come on, get a life, get to work, pay attention, do something. But Jake, like I said, he was a great athlete. He had those skills. He made money, but he opened this bar, and then his job then was to walk around barefoot in the sand, drink beer with Pancake and hook up with Nicole and just kind of live life. And like I said, he keeps getting drawn into Ray's world. So Jake kind of evolved from that. But when Deep Six, which was the first book in this series, started, I had one scene in mind. That's it. I didn't know who was going to get murdered. I didn't know who was going to do it. I didn't know who the bad guys were. I didn't know anything about the story. I just wrote that scene, and then I wrote the next one, and then I wrote the next one. And after I wrote about 10, I said, this is going somewhere. And that's really how this series started. It just came seat of the pants. So I guess you'd say that was a panster. The humor in these books is so great. Is it hard to go back and forth between writing these books and you're more serious? Yeah, I mean, it's not really, because Kane and Harper series, like I said, is much darker. They are a non-biologic brother and sister raised as a gypsy family, basically trained to be criminals from birth. Bobby Kane became an expert with knives, was known as Bobby Blade as a kid because he could throw knives so well. And then he was trained how to be a second story thief, how to get in and out of places, da 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 da. Harper, on the other hand, who was a year older, Harper is a quarter Cherokee, and where Bobby's blonde and blue eyed, Harper's dark eyes, dark hair, darker complexion. But they're brothers and sisters, and they were raised by the same couple within this 60-member traveling gypsy group. In the South, we called them Irish travelers. They weren't real Roma gypsies, but they walked around putting on shows, traveled around. Back in my day, they ran around buckboards and horse-drawn things, and now they use SUVs and motorhomes. But they also learn to pick your pocket. They also learn to run scams. They also learn to do second story robberies and stuff. And Harper is smart. She could cry at the drop of a hat. She could scam you out of anything by looking in your face, and she could pick your pocket while you were looking at her. So these kids, when they were 12 and 13 respectively, the FBI came and arrested all the family. They ended up going to orphanage. Adopted goes to separate families. They both end up in the military. Bobby in special ops doing some assassinations, Harper in the CIA running black ops. And they didn't know until they met 15 years later on an operation in Afghanistan. That's the backstory of those stories, but they're darker. They will do what's necessary. They're fixers now. They will scam you. They will kidnap you. They will kill you. They will do what's necessary to get what they're hired to do done. Jake's nothing like that. Jake is nothing like that. But what I find is, while I'm writing a Jake story, I'm thinking about the next Kane and Harper book. And while I'm writing the Kane and Harper book, I think about the next Jake book, and I make notes on each. So they kind of go back and forth, but they're totally different writing, totally different styles. Jake is written in first person with multiple third person for the other characters. Kane and Harper are written totally in third person, multiple point of view. And I find it fun that way. And I try to write a book of each year. So every 6 months, I got to turn out a book. It's so great hearing you read the book. Would you ever narrate your own audiobooks? So as a matter of fact, I've recorded 2 of the Jake Longley books. I did, what did I do? I did Sunshine State, and now I've done Rigged. So they will be out in audiobook. Actually, Sunshine State's already out. And it was interesting. That was interesting. I had never done that before. I have a podcast series, so I'm used to that. I used to have a little segment on a TV show here, and I've done a lot of interviews and stuff. So that part wasn't intimidating. But to sit here and read your own words out loud, and it takes hours and hours and hours to do, was a little odd. And it's interesting. The one thing I found that was the most difficult of all this was I had to keep telling myself to slow down, because I do things fast and I move fast and I do all that stuff fast. So I had to tell myself to slow down because I'd catch my rhythm picking up too much. So like I said, it was interesting, and thanks for asking, but I've done that. So look for them. They're out there. What kind of research did I have to do for this series? Some. I visited Gulf Shores. I grew up in North Alabama, and this is way down in South Alabama. We never had money to take a vacation, so I never went down there growing up. But I went down there and visited, had some friends show me around to different places. And then we spent a week in Fairhope and had a wonderful time there, wonderful time there. So I knew when we left that city that I was going to write a story set in that city, and this one was it. So that kind of research. And then I had to look at a few other things. But for the most part, these Jake books don't require a lot because they're basically sitcoms. They basically are. The comedy comes from situations, and of course, sitcom stands for situational comedy. Comedy. Lord knows I didn't invent this. That was all Lucy and Gleason and those guys that I grew up with. I'm old. I remember the early days of black and white television, all the sitcoms, and how they all got started. But if you watch any of them, I don't care which one, Big Bang Theory or whatever, Cheers and all that, the comedy comes out of the situation that people find themselves in. And that's kind of what happens here. But Jake has a quirky take, and that creates a lot of comedic things. There's serious crimes. There's bad stuff going on. But Jake just kind of flies through it. Oh, Lord. Barbara Varma. Barbara, you're an idiot. I have to tell you, Barbara lives about a 9 iron from me, and we were in a writing group together for many years, and she's always trying to pull my chain. And when will Nicole and Jake talk about having kids? Well, they're not going to. They're not going to get married, and they're not going to have kids because that kills the comedy. If Sam and Diane had ever gotten married on Cheers, it would have killed it. And that's not going to happen. So they're never going to have a relationship above where they are right now. And basically their relationship is they like each other, they love each other, and they like being around each other. And so they hang out together all the time. They got separate residences, but they always end up staying in one or the other. And they have sex all the time. If anybody's read the books, you know that. But they just like each other. And so neither one of them are at a place that they want to complicate anything at all. And I like that dynamic. How could these characters and stories be different with a setting in the middle of nowhere, say out in Utah or in Montana? Actually, it wouldn't be different. Jake and Nicole, the book that I'm just now finishing, which is number 5, which will be out in a year, and I've done the first draft and the first rewrite, so I got a couple of more passes I have to do through it before I send it to my agent and my readers. And it's called The OC, the OC is here, Orange County, California, which is where I live. And they come out here to visit a friend because Nicole writes screenplays. That's what she does. She had been an actress for a while. And if you read the series, you kind of know that the dynamic with her uncle, the producer, et cetera, et cetera. But so she's got this screenplay that her uncle Charles is going to produce, and they're coming out to film it. So they come out 3 weeks early so they can have a little vacation. Nicole actually lives here. She grew up in Beverly Hills, but she lives in Orange County. But now she's staying in Gulf Shores in her uncle's mansion there. And that's how she and Jake hooked up. So they come out to her place here to spend a couple of weeks before they have to go up to LA and do the shooting. And she has a friend who is a local small market TV personality that does stories and news and stuff like that. And she picks up a stalker. And so that whole story takes place out here in Orange County. So I don't think I think you can don't get me wrong, setting is incredibly important for a story. I think it's often overlooked. All you have to do is read James Lee Burke to find out how important setting is. But setting is very important to every story. But most stories could take place anywhere if the setting fits. And so I think, comedy's everywhere, everything's funny. So I think you can set this series just about anywhere you want to go. Would I grant TV rights to the Jake Longley series? Yeah. Do you know somebody? You better believe it. And who would you want to play Jake? It's interesting. Timothy Olyphant. Timothy Olyphant's one of my favorite actors. I mean, he played Raylan Givens in the Justified series, and I think if you picture Timothy Olyphant, you picture Jake. He's tall, he's lanky, he's 6'3", he's lanky. He was a pitcher. He's a good-looking guy. He's not overly pretentious. He doesn't prim and primp a lot. He's just a guy. And he's a guy that everybody likes. Men like him, women like him, everybody likes him. He's just easygoing because he's low pressure. And I get that kind of feeling from a lot of the roles that Timothy Olyphant has played. So I think that's who I envision anyway. This is an unusual book signing event due to the current pandemic. Other than this one, share your most traumatic, fun, or funny book event story. Well, let's try the very first one I ever had. I had written a question and answer book. It came out before Forensics for Dummies, and it was really my first published book back in, 2003. And I went up to the Mystery Bookstore up in L.A. and in Brentwood, right outside of UCLA. And it's right near the entrance to UCLA campus. And it was a great bookstore. It was one of the great, most famous bookstores in LA. It's closed now, unfortunately, as a lot of independent bookstores are. So I'm thinking, wow, this is fun. This is great. So Nan and I drove up there. And when we got to the bookstores on a Saturday afternoon, got to the bookstore, there was a line, literally a line. It was half a block long. There were 60, 70 people in line trying to get in the store. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. I am a superstar for sure. So you go around back and park in the deck, and you come in through the back door of the bookstore. And as I walk in there, who's sitting there but Ray Bradbury? So that's who they were there to see, not me. But the upshot of that is Ray was a gracious man. He signed all the books. We shook hands. I got to meet him. I got to chat with him for a while, which was a thrill. And then he and the lady that was helping him, he was an old guy then and wasn't the most stable. She helped him out, and they go to the car and leave. And I look around, and it's me and Nan and the employees of the bookstore. So that was my first book signing. Welcome to Hollywood, baby. It was funny. And I'll tell you one more that was cool. I'd written again at one of the question and answer books. I forget which book it was, and we drove out to Palm Springs, to Rancho Mirage, to do a book signing at a Borders there. Remember Borders? Borders were great. And we go there, and it was in June. Did I mention it was in June? Did I mention it was Palm Springs? It was 117 degrees. The car temperature thing, as we're going down Highway 111, heading into there from off the I-10, read 124. So we go to the bookstore, and there's Nan and I and two employees. So I sat there for 2 hours. No one walked by, no one drove by, no one came in the store, nothing, zero. The two people working there were so apologetic and so wonderful. But these things happen. But the upshot of that is I'm sitting there by myself, and I'm looking at this whole collection of dummies books. And I kept looking at it. They had a whole rack full of these forensics for these dummies books. And I thought, I wonder if they have forensics for dummies. So I walked over there and looked, and I didn't see it. It was a Saturday. I got home that night. I went online, went to the Wiley thing and looked for it. They didn't have it. So I thought, great. So I called my agent Monday, and I said, Kimberly, I got a great idea. Kimberly Cameron, best agent on the planet. I said, I got a great idea for a book. She said, what is it? I said, Forensics for Dummies. She said, that's a great idea. You should write it. I said, that's what I'm thinking. And I said, well, look, BEA is coming to LA next week. Why don't I go to the Wiley thing, find out who handles this stuff, and just talk to them? She said, that's great, do it. So I go to there, I find out, I said, who's in charge of the For Dummies series? And she said, that lady right over there, Diane Steele. She's great. She's the VP for all that. And I went over and I introduced myself to her. And I had a card for my book, I think Murder and Mayhem, my first question answer book. And I handed it to her and I told her who I was. And she looked at that and she said, you wrote this book? And I said, yeah. She said, I have this book. I love this book. I said, really? I said, she says, as a matter of fact, we're thinking about doing a book called Forensics for Dummies. I said, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. She said, well, we don't have an author attached to that. I said, you do now. And we laughed, and that's how Forensics for Dummies came about. So sometimes even the worst book signings can turn into gold. And Forensics for Dummies, I mean, my God, it's I don't know, it's gazillionth printing. It's all over the world. But, they got built-in marketing. And that's pretty cool. But this is an unusual signing event. And remember, there are going to be book plates. Anybody who wants to buy a book from Mysterious Galaxy, and please, 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 please support them. They just almost went under. They changed hands, and now they're being resurrected like the phoenix from the ashes. Please, please, please support them because they've always supported us writers. Buy a book. If it's not my book, buy somebody's book. But if you buy my book, I'll sign a book plate, and they'll send it to you, and you can put it in the book. Do you plan to age these characters as the series goes on? Probably not. I like the ages where they are right now. I know people that do that, but I just kind of like to leave the characters as they are. I don't want them to change too much. What new fear or phobia will you be giving Jake in your next book? I don't think Jake's afraid of much because he doesn't take anything very seriously. He just kind of goes through life, kind of slew-footed, hands in his pocket, all shucks kind of guy. And I don't think Jake sees things, even dangerous things. And I can tell you what, if you've read this series, I guarantee you Nicole doesn't get scared. She will jump in your face in a heartbeat. She's got Jake roped into taking Krav Maga classes, which is the Israeli defense system that's very aggressive, and she will knock your teeth out if you get in her way. She's a tall, good-looking blonde, used to be a model, used to be an actress, now a screenwriter, and all that, all that bubble-headed blonde stuff that you think. No, she's smart, she's tough, she'll jump in your face, and she'll knock you out if she has to. Jake, on the other hand, would just laugh at you and, try to shake your hand, buy you a beer. So I don't see him having a lot of phobias and fears. I hope not anyway. Who knows? Who knows what'll pop in my head? Does reading for the audiobooks end up helping you with the later books and about these characters or any writing? It does. You read, and I think it's advice for any writer. You can't just write your book on the computer. That can't happen. At some point in time, and for me, it's usually after about 3 passes, you have to print it out. And you have to see it written. It reads different. It smells different. It tastes different. It sounds different. It's everything different when it's actually words on a page than it is words on a computer screen. I don't know why that is, but I think almost any writer will tell you that, at least everyone I've ever talked to. And when I'm reading back through it, I read it out loud to myself. And so that helps. And this was the same thing, only more so, because now I was having to slow down. I was having to read every word. And I couldn't change it. And again, I introduced you to Barbara earlier. Barbara would tell you this. When I would read at the group, I would end up editing as I went. I'd say things that weren't on the page because they sounded better that way than they did what I'd written. And they would give me grief about it all the time. I really, really, really had to concentrate on avoiding doing that because once the book is in print, editing is done. You can't do it again. And that's why once I published a book, and I think this will be my 20th, I don't go back and read them again because I want to change every sentence. I want to change every paragraph. I find typos and it makes me want to pull my teeth out. But so I don't read anything I've ever published. It's too painful. It drives you crazy. When did you know you wanted to be a writer? And what drove you to the mystery thriller genre in particular? Well, the second question, no, because there's a lot of people I want to kill, and I want to know how to do it. I got a long list, but seriously, I was always drawn to science. Obviously, being a physician, I was always drawn to writing and reading. I grew up in the South, and if you can't tell a story in the South, they won't feed you. They will put you out behind the barn and let you die. And so the dinner table at my home growing up, everybody had a story. It wasn't like what happened to school today on nothing. Oh, no, 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 no. Something happened at school today, and it was a story, and there were subplots, there was dialogue, there was set decoration, there was everything. And that wasn't just my family, it was everybody I knew. Everybody in the South can spin a yarn. So I always knew I could tell a story. Never had a problem with that. Never had a problem with words and pontificating about BS all the time. I never had trouble with that. Everybody I ever knew was like that. It's just the way the South is. But writing it, different animal, totally different animal. But I told myself for years, I got these stories that I want to tell. So when I retire, then I'll write these stories. But about 25 years ago, I said, I'm not going to retire. I mean, I'm still not retired. I still go to the office 2 days a week. I was in the office all day today. I just, I said, so if not now, when? Just do it. What do you got to lose? So I took a couple of classes at University of California, Irvine over here, which is about a 3-wood away. And I took a couple of night classes and then just started writing. I joined a couple of writers groups and I started writing. And, I wrote a lot of crap, but you learn and learn and learn, and you read and read and read, and you write and write and write. But it's something that I always wanted to do, but I never really took it seriously until, well, maybe 25 years ago. And then I said, okay, get off your butt. If you're going to do this, if you really want to do this, give it a shot. What's the worst thing that can happen? You turn out to be an idiot who isn't able to put a sentence together. Okay, what have you lost? What have you lost? And I recommend that to anybody. If nothing else, start journals. Remember, anything you write, no one's going to read it but you. So who cares if it's good or bad or indifferent? That's the lesson I wish I'd learned earlier, is to don't worry about being a bad writer. You can fix it in the rewrite. Just get the damn story out. But that's what I learned. But this classes at UCI, the writing groups I joined, all of that was critically important. What book authors do you read? Well, my two favorite are easy, James Lee Burke and Elmore Leonard. And the reasons for that is very simple. They're both wonderful writers, number one. You can learn so much from both of them. James Lee Burke is very lyrical. He's very poetic. I mean, I will read his books and I will stop and I will literally take a breath and I'll go back and read the paragraph again. And I sit here and tell myself, I know all those words. Why can't I put them together that way? Why can't I put them together that way? Because he is literary, but gritty, down and dirty, in your face crime fiction. And anyone who has not read James Lee Burke is missing out on one of life's great treats. Start with Black Cherry Blues or Purple Cane Road. Black Cherry Blues or Purple Cane Road. Or go to the beginning, Neon Rain, which was the first in the Dave Robichaux series. And that's probably even a better place to start. They're brilliantly written and told. Elmore Leonard, on the other hand, he writes very clean, very sparse, very in your face. He has characters that are all scumbags. They have no social redeeming value whatsoever, but you love every one of them. And his writing style is clean and concise. He is known as the master of dialogue. His famous quote that's always attributed to him is leave out the parts that people skip. And if you read his stuff, it is lean and mean, but you can't stop reading it because he's truly, truly a master at writing crime fiction. He had a Western writing career way before he started all the crime fiction set mostly in Detroit and Florida. And he wrote 310 to Yuma and Hombre and things they made movies out of. So Elmore Leonard was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful storyteller and writer. You can learn so much from both of these people. What are you working on now? Well, as I just said, I'm finishing the next Jake book, and I'll have it done in a few weeks, and I'll be sending it out. And doing the final edits on the next Kane Harper book, which will come out in October. It's called Prior Bad Acts. And then I'm starting to take notes on the next Kane Harper book, which will probably be a year from October. And I'm thinking about setting it in Charleston, South Carolina area. I haven't fully decided on that yet, but I think so. So I got a lot going. Got a short story coming out in, what is it, October, November? Suspense Publishing putting out a thing called Nothing Good Happens After Midnight. It's a series of short story. Jeffrey Deaver is going to be the editor of it, and so I'm really looking forward to that. All the stories are in, all the editing's pretty much been done, so we're waiting for that to come out. So there's a lot going on. Which of your characters would you hate to run into in a grocery store or have to move next door to you? Well, I don't think any of my protagonists, I mean, I would like them. They would be fun, but there's been some bad guys. And I think the worst was Brian Kurtz, probably, who was the bad guy in the first Dub Walker book called Stress Fracture. You would not want to live anywhere near this guy. He was completely over the top and had no brakes. It's as simple as that. He had no brakes. I think it's the bad guys. A good bad guy makes a story. A good bad guy makes a story. So I think they're telling us we have to leave now. But listen, I really appreciate all of you that showed up for this. It's humbling, and I really appreciate it. If you want to buy the book, please do, and buy it from Mysterious Galaxy. And like I said, I'll sign a book plate for you. But until then, God bless.
I just want to say thank you so much, like DP was saying, thank you so much to everyone who attended, but also thank you so much to our author. I had such a pleasure listening to you and hearing your questions and everything. I'm also a fellow Southerner, so I was like, it's so true. You have to know how to tell a story, otherwise no one will listen to you. And it's such a pleasure getting to hear you in particular talk about the South and the settings and how you bring them to life.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. But anyways, this was such a great event. Like DP said, go ahead and order those books. And I hope everyone has a good evening. We're going to go ahead and end the live stream. And have a good night, everybody.